The meeting of the Council of Thought. Today's date, it's the first full moon of winter 2020. The place, the Cave of Wonders. The time, midnight. On tonight's itinerary is a decade strategical life plan of 2020 to 2030. The clerk arrives. The Council of Thought is called into session to discuss the general direction for the next decade ahead. This council meets only once every 10 years to reflect. Each member in the attendance may plead their case before the Supreme Leader. Our most honorable leader, Brain, shall hear what is before him, and in his ultimate wisdom shall decide the path which shall be followed. His decision is final and binding. For the record, please state your name, value, and position. In attendance. The clerk, neutral, cave attendant to the fire of creation. Brain, supreme leader, final authority. Eyes, nearsightedness, champion of capitalism. Heart, Mother Nature, champion of environmentalism. Body, liberty and freedom, champion of individualism. And soul, the transcendentalist, champion of spiritualism. Brain begins the session. Thank you, everyone, for coming together today. As you all know, it is the beginning of a new decade, and we must reassess how far we have come as a community and where we would like to go from here. As you all know, we are one being, joined together, and each of your contributing thoughts today will be weighed on equal grounds. I, as always, will remain the final authority in determination of our action, which I shall make after careful consideration of your ideas. On the agenda today is our 10-year plan. As in years past, each of you will be given a turn to speak. Since we went with I's plan last decade, let us start with a progress report from him. Eyes, you have the floor. Eyes begins to speak. Thank you, Brain. I am happy to report we have come a long way in these past 10 years. We currently enjoy high society with all the materialistic wealth one can afford. Our penthouse is in the middle of our crowded city, high above the city street noise. We enjoy comfort and safety within the cemented walls of our fortress. Our sterilized environment and double-paned windows lock out the destructive forces of nature. With an abundance of technology, we want for nothing. With the exception of homeless that we must walk over to get to our cars, life is orderly and fully managed. Our investments in the financial market is booming, and we are set to double our GDP by year's end. Since the onset of globalization, we have broken down trade barriers and freed our ability to cross borders. We have strategically gathered significant amounts of raw materials from the earth and used cheap labor resources to assemble products in the sweatshops of the third world. We have fully capitalized on this fortune by maximizing profits and selling products to first world customers who are conditioned through the use of pointed advertisements to actually believe they cannot live without our products. We have sufficiently manipulated the system and enjoy lax regulations with little accountability. Our corporations have manipulated public demand by building infrastructures that force the use of our fossil fuel systems. And we have been happy to supply financial and political sway to ensure ongoing cooperation from the governments. Our plan to force people to comply is working beautifully. It is an open and shut case, in my opinion, Supreme Leader. We must continue with my plan of business as usual, and we shall soon become gods in our own right. What more can you ask of life? Brain begins to talk again. Heart, I see your hand has been raised. Let the council recognize Heart. You may proceed with the floor. Heart begins to speak. Thank you, Supreme Leader. While I do appreciate the advancement of technology that has arisen from the path of eyes, I have another tale to tell. Eyes, you are blind in your sight, and you see not what is before you. You need glasses, I tell you. Nay, I shout, we are dying. With greed on your mind and science in your hands, you see yourself a dominating god. With nature, just a lifeless tool that you use as the means of your destruction. You have replaced the natural world with artificiality, and your mechanical controlling doesn't account for the full context of life. Leader Brain, we know not the feel of the soil upon our fingers, or the path of the winds that carry the birds away in their migrations. Do the birds even exist anymore? For I cannot see through this smog of industrial pollution. All we experience of nature in this concrete jungle of city life is that which we have glimpsed, broadcast upon the Discovery Channel. Inside, I feel the life energy within me swiveling up and dying. Look at the signs we refuse to see. We hide in our home, refusing to see the ailments of society, who suffer under these mental stress, irritability, paranoia, and sadness that has come from a disconnect with our nature. One day, I wandered alone in a crowded place, and I was carried away by the shouting and the yelling. The city had gathered together into one giant voice. This voice, it had echoes, and it spread through the land. It opened my eyes to a new global movement. The people were crying together, with their arms locked tight, trying to force reason to the ears of those few with the power. The people were saying, "We see you, puppet masters, who like thieves dance and perform to distract while pillaging our earth home of its value and resource." And suddenly, I remembered this notion of nature. In a blur and a daze, I walked on, and suddenly found myself on the outskirts of town. There were trees there, magnificently tall. So tall, in fact, I could not make out the tops of their heights. I stopped dead in my tracks to wonder at such sights. I stood still there for a long moment, and for the first time in a long time, I felt relief. I found myself no longer cringing from the yelling of passing humans, the incessant honking and squealing, the drilling and spilling. But instead, I heard the song of the bird and the chirp of the squirrel. And in the brightness of the day, I found new lightness in my step. I decided to walk on and continue my hike into this disconnected world, to see for myself what lay beyond. Until there, upon my travels, I stumbled upon an ancient grove. It was here that the ancient souls of the trees were talking, and where I could hear and listen upon the reminiscing. They spoke of the land, its beauty and complexity. For hours I listened, and I watched as the life moved around me, like an interconnecting transference of energy. As I bonded with these ancient trees, their united souls connected with mine, and I felt their message of the simplicity of life and love. But then, I felt their pain, the depths of which knows no bounds. And I asked them, why does it have to be so? They had showed me the earth, dying, and its journey along the lineage of time. I saw into the future of where we are heading if we stay on this path of corporate capitalist greed. The trees gave a lesson. They said, we have been blinded by strategy, manipulated and deceived by those with the greed. They spoke of the answer, awareness and action. They told me that like the seeds of themselves that have once grown into massive roots, trunks, and branches, so too will seeds of love combined with our action. The effects of our actions can last beyond our own life, and like the ancient grove, it will last down through the ages. If we change the way we live, vote, and speak, the world can be healed, and the horror of this destructive future can be set upon an alternate route. Supreme Leader, considering this story, I ask the Council to change the course of our direction. I ask that we give up our wasteful habits and business as usual and come together as a community to live simply and with harmony with the land. I urge that we proactively take action and heal the wounds of the world in which all life depends. Then Brain begins to talk again. Thank you, Heart. Your lessons are valid and will be considered. Body, you remain quiet and reflective. What do you say of the matter before us? And then the body begins to speak. Yes, well, I have sat here and listened, and sadly, Heart has given me much to think upon. I always thought of us as an individual type and masters of our own destinies. We have been faced with all the obstacles that society throws at us, and we played the games by their rules. We played our game well, and we have enjoyed material wealth. But perhaps it is time to question these rules and the game as a whole in which we all play. After all, what is this paper money and piles of plastic we hoard all about. It looks just like garbage we keep shuffling aside. I do agree. We must reassess our ways and observe what roles individuals should play. But I say, must we focus on the whole? A collection of individuals together as one? We are quite capable on our own feet, which is evidenced by the way we have become masters of the world. So, now that we see our industry is killing the world, can't we just walk off and live with the trees in the forest? Can we just leave all those selfish and crazy people behind? We can go out in the woods and build our own castle there. We will hide from the people and keep safe from their danger. We should focus on us and change the world that way. This community you speak of, they have hurt us and raped us. You ask now that we work alongside them and join arms, like those you saw in the streets? Did you forget that we have been beaten and bruised by this community? They are so riddled with selfishness and greed that our love would seem a sign of weakness. They will smile to our face and then stab us in the back once we turn. Supreme Leader, I agree. We should walk a new path, because what good is our life without the land from which we live? So, let's pack up our things and escape into the night. We'll live with the trees, become one with the land. Brain begins to speak again. Thank you, body, for your input. Let's see. We have only one left to hear from, and then I will decide. Soul, it's your turn. What do you say about the matter before us? Soul began to speak. Supreme Leader, thank you for this chance to speak. Overall, I feel Heart is correct in her point, and we indeed have become disconnected with nature. But this goes deeper than merely our economic and political structures. Body was right in that we must reassess the way we live. But I regret this tactic of shunning the community. The individual and all of their actions have a relationship with the natural world around it. But what is a social connection? It is when two unique individuals come together with a similar belief or agenda. Life is surrounded by them, and these relationships surpass merely the human to human, but are integrated on all levels. I do implore you, body, perhaps part of the problem is that human communities have been torn all apart and are no longer functioning in healthy ways. No, I can no longer say I believe the individual can ever be separate or isolated from the whole. Tell me, body, is it not so that we are awakening just as we are awakening as earthly conscious people? So too are the people around us. Like a flower that is in bloom, each petal opens in its own unique direction and way. The people who have hurt us were reacting to a life disconnected from nature. It is a complicated and compounded mess. Look around at society and see how our systems have adversely affected people in different ways. We find some who abuse others, while others resort to drugs and alcohol to cope with the loss, the pain, the homeless on the street, that eyes so carefully walked over, are signs just as well of this destructive life we lead. In the end, we are all victims of the same harmful world. We are all victims of lies and a social construction implemented so long ago in the past. The age of enlightenment and science, indeed. Now I must tell you, this social construction has many root causes at hand, beyond just science and reason. In part, I must say, is religion to blame. These rules of religion aim to constrict and to limit. Perhaps, I would say, none more so than Judeo-Christian. Its rules and regulations, they've disconnected us from nature and bound faith to the inside of walled enclosures, so limited in thought and value. Judeo-Christians of old, in their dogmatic sense of reality, were so vain in their pursuit of a human-made center that they worked to suppress the spiritual connection between people and nature. The rituals of the past that kept people in close contact with nature were deemed by the church acts of heresy and barbaric pagan past. Branding these practices as sin and corruption, they slowly began a course through the guise of deceiving ritual that separated us people from God's true place of worship, that which is found anywhere life abounds. You see, before came the Christians, there existed nature practices and rituals that gave thanks and reverence for the land. In Russia, for example, there existed a double faith in early Christian days, where people held on to their old pagan ways. One practice in particular, they would baptize their trees and the grass and the boughs. They loved them as family and referred to them as godparents, or even perhaps co-parents. But the Orthodox clerks, they tried hard to stomp out this behavior. In these branches of Judeo-Christian faith, there could be no reverence for anything other than that which had been sanctioned by the church. Religious gatherings were forbidden to be held outside, while faith was brought indoors and closely and stringently restricted to the limited anthropocentric viewpoint. The spirits of nature were heathenized as having devilish intent. And so there began the greatest disillusion to modern-day man. The church punished those who were found at one with nature. When searching through ancient texts dating back to AD 1008, I discovered a passage of penance for those who prayed in nature. It was the book of a corrector of worm, who goes by the name of Burchard. He wrote in his book, and I quote, that if any come to a place to pray other than the church or other religious place by which the bishop or thy priest showed thee, that is, either to the springs or the stones or the trees or the crossroads, and if that person should find reverence for the place, lighted a candle or a torch, or carried thither bread or any offerings, or eaten there, or sought there any healing of body or mind, that they must serve a penance of 3 years on the appointed fast days. 3 years penance for praying in nature. This was the start of humanity's great disconnect from nature. So you see, humanity has created socially constructed cultures that manipulate and fool. Judeo-Christians are not the only ones. Perhaps all structural religions are in part to blame. For you see, I have another example from across the world who had no connection to Europe's westernized thought. In the Caicos, who dwelled in America, they pose a great parallel around the same time of life in AD 1000. Religion served as the glue to help bind these people to their lands. These people, the Caicos, were once free, not bound to their homes or specific plots of land. They roamed as hunters and gatherers and maintained flexible fluidity with the unpredictable land. But as society grew more complex, their ways of living married them to the land. They became fixed. Nature cannot be permanent, but is fluid and moving. Their societies grew too big, like our world today, and growth became unsustainable and their solutions too narrow. Here too there was religion that acted like glue, with limitations and restrictions of its own. The religion promoted only economic growth and rigidity. One more thing I must say before our meeting can adjourn. For I see the mouth of our cave that the dawn is soon approaching, and our night of wonder and prose must come to its end. My dear body, I have walked with the tribes of Africa, and there I learned the legends of the old, straight from the fruit basket of life itself. I tell you now, we can never be separate individuals, because the past connects to the present in a never-ending cycle of cause and effect. Our ancestors live within us, and their multitude of personalities play in on our thoughts and our reactions. You see, what happens to the individual happens to the whole, but our identity is not only confined to this role. We have inside us an inner substance that draws from our ancestors, that stretches back to the beginnings of time. Their memories live within us, with their feelings and desires mixed within ours. We are united together in eternity as we evolve on our journey. And one day, we will join the spirits of our ancestors in the sky. But the acts of our life, with its behavior and depth, will carry on down through our bloodline. We are one with our community, and yet uniquely individual. Supreme Leader, I wish to change the direction of our course. I agree with Heart. We are dying, and my soul is fading away with each passing day. This decade to come, we must start a new path. We must work with our community and rejoice in our uniqueness. We must create new solutions and use creative might to look past all the blindness and find what is right. A connection with nature is what is most needed. These chains we have lived with are heavy and rusted. Indeed, it will require an awareness and willingness of more people to help release the hold of these chains that bind us. But think, to be free from these walls of our enclosure, can't you see that they have become like the walls of a prison? All this buying and selling of things without value. We must listen to nature and learn from the land. Brain begins to speak again. Thank you for all your time. All your speeches have moved me, and I am decided on our path. For the next decade, we shall focus on a way to move away from our capitalist path. We shall take all the advances of technology and build an infrastructure of simplicity and a localized community. We shall spend time to sit amongst the trees and learn again what lessons we can of the land. We have been blind, but now that we see again more clearly in scope, we must be swift in our action. The future of the world is relying on our vigilance. Eyes, I know you look frustrated that Heart has won out this day, but have no fears, my friend, for your short-sightedness is not your fault. I promise you that you will see, once we arrive to a new culture, that the chaos of change will prove beneficial in the long run. Soul is right in her thinking. We must turn back to nature and find common ground in which there is balance. But are pieces of truth in all? There are pieces of truth in all of the world. But we must work to rediscover this knowledge anew and find once more our place within nature. Then Ice begins to speak. But how can we do this when we know not where to start? We know only the city and nothing of how to work with nature. Sure, we could start with the children, but that will take time to bloom, and by then we'll be dead and buried in the ground. How can we live at peace with the land when we have no knowledge of it? And how can we reach all the people who are lost in the chaos of their busy lives? Then Brain begins to speak again. These are great points you have brought up, Eyes. But from the wisdom of Kathleen Moore, the time to act is now. I have decided we must start an environmental task force, much like that of our neighborhood watch. We can reach out to the adults in the community by teaching them about the land and sharing with them the knowledge of the indigenous who know its ways. We can hand out bulletins, monthly essays, hold town meetings with various public speakers. We can publish television ads that teach instead of sell garbage we don't need. In the movie theaters, too. We can reach the people there. We can have, instead of previews, a 15-minute movie that entertains with a message, while also teaching the community about the nature around them. These videos can be locally based and developed around the needs of its specific bioregion. We can force, in this way, a learning of interconnectedness with nature. We can teach the people the dangers that are in need of addressing, while offering solutions and ways they can get involved. In the community, we can offer free family events with educational booths and plays that are fun but packed with important life lessons. We must reach out our arms and teach our community. Together, we can continue the growth of this environmental movement that so moved Hart that day of her walk amongst the streets of the city. Learning is key because it will not only drive localized awareness, but it will also teach adults the lessons they never received growing up. And so, my council of thought, I thank you for coming and sharing with us the lessons you have learned. I am excited and renewed with this spirit of change. I see a bright future full of possibility. Let us adjourn now, this day, and in 10 years from now, we will once again come together to discuss our progress anew. Then the clerk begins to speak again. The meeting of the Council of Thought is adjourned. The decision made this day is final and binding. All may be excused, and we are set to reassemble 10 years again from this day. Good luck, and may the choices you have made this day have a lasting and positive change upon your world. Meeting adjourned.